Well, what sort of people, Jewish people, believe in Jesus? Well, I think Jews for Jesus would probably say that they come from all walks of life, from all educational backgrounds, and it's a mixed bag. They could be right. They could be right, but I'm only going to tell you from my experience as 42 years as a Jewish believer in Jesus, that my observations were quite different. What I noticed when I was a Jewish believer in Jesus, very noticeably, is how many people who believed in Jesus suffered from mental health problems. They were perhaps suffering from schizophrenia, clinical depression, anxiety. They perhaps lived alone, were widows, people on their own, depressed, living in bed sits, perhaps they didn't know anybody, or because of the depression, it is a lot to do with mental health. That is very common in my observations. Also people who don't have much respect for Judaism, the kind of people who are sneer at the rabbis and say, what do they know? So you almost got some Jewish people who just don't, almost have a contempt for Judaism, although they don't actually know that much about it. They would claim to, but they don't. And so they're seeking other gods. They're inquiring into other things, right? But they're not exploring their own religion of Judaism. The ex-London Jews for Jesus guy, Richard Harvey, states on YouTube himself that Judaism didn't do much for him. That's, didn't get much from going to shul. And you have to ask the question, Richard, well, why didn't you change shuls? Why didn't you get more involved? Why didn't you explore your own religion more, right? I would hear from Jewish believers in Jesus just total contempt for the rabbis, almost. They're almost very arrogant sort of people. The attitude, well, what do they know? It's really contempt for their own people. But I want to come back to the main thing that I noticed was about people who are inadequate in some way, without casting a slur on them. No. For instance, I went to a Jewish high school, right? Now, I know for a fact there were two other people of my year who ended up believing in Jesus. Now, one person, by their own admission, was not brought up particularly religious. They went to a Jewish school, but they weren't particularly religious. They probably didn't know much about the religion. They know the bits and pieces about the main festivals, but I'm sure by their own admission they say they don't know much, right? But they became a Jewish believer in Jesus. I don't know if they still are. Now, there was another boy who I noticed at this school, and he was in the lowest stream, and he was at the lowest end of the lowest stream. And when I was there, and I was about 13 and 14, I noticed that there was something wrong with him. Now, I think looking back, it's what's called now today, it's called special needs. But in those days, it was called being a bit backward and a bit simple, right? I'm not meaning to be derogatory, I'm just telling you as it is, right? There was obviously something not quite right with him. I do remember him wearing tzitzit. I remember that. And he always had a yarmulke on. So he was obviously being brought up a degree of being religious, degree of fromness. But this is a person who ended up converted to Christianity and joining a church. And I did actually meet him a lot later at a particular church, right, when I was a Jewish believer in Jesus. And he'd married a very nice Jewish girl. She was a lovely Jewish girl. But again, without being mean, how can I say it? It's like she didn't come across to me as very smart, bright or intelligent. She again come across to me as rather lovely, but a little bit simple, a little bit, and easily led. But she was a lovely girl. You know, they were, you look, you said they were a lovely couple. Obviously, they were a lovely couple. He was lovely, but you could see there is a problem, and it's these people that I notice that get ensnared in Christianity. Elderly people on their own. The missionaries find them. I don't know how to manage it. And of course, the whole thing about converting the Jew to Jesus is to do it through friendship, because this is how most Christians come to believe in Jesus, is through their friends and acquaintances, university, college, social events, hobbies, and so on. So the evangelical Christian is encouraged to befriend the Jew, befriend the little Jewish old lady living on her own, who perhaps could do with some help with the shopping and things like that. Now, I do remember something very chilling that I witnessed, and I was very, very shocked. This was decades ago. Present were some people from a church, non-Jewish, born-again Christians, and a missionary to the Jews. This was a person paid, it's their job, they're employed full-time to be a missionary to the Jews, right? And she lived in an ultra-Orthodox Jewish area, right? The church was just one church. I don't know if anybody went to it, there was anybody going to it, because it was a Jewish area, but she was based there, and she had a flat there. She was a very nice lady, very, very sincere, but she believed she was being called by God, to convert the Jews to believe in Jesus. And what she told us there, I remember where I was sitting when I heard it, that a Jewish boy, a teenage, a young boy, I don't know, he's about 19, 20, who was mentally ill, had committed suicide by jumping in front of a train. And when she told the group and told, I was sitting there, I can remember it, there was total and complete silence. Nobody said, "Oh, isn't that awful? Isn't that terrible? Oh." Christians often react like this, is you get these silences from them, and when it's sometimes, it goes on this silence, and it becomes inappropriate, and you're thinking, what on earth are they thinking? What are they thinking? You see, I'm just giving you a normal reaction of normal people. So, oh, isn't that terrible? How terrible, he was so young. Oh, did he have, what was this? You start asking questions. What about his mother? What about his father? People want to know everything after the initial momentary silence. But this didn't happen with the Christians, and this is what they're like. They are funny like this. I think it's because they don't know what to say. They're obviously thinking, they knew this boy was a Jewish believer in Jesus, and he committed suicide. Now, there was obviously strain within the family at that time. This is before it became more commonplace for Jewish people to believe in Jesus. This is decades ago. When it was really a big thing for a Jew to believe in Jesus. Very few people would never even know or hear of somebody, a Jewish person, believing in Jesus. And you've got this mentally sick boy. Now, if he's jumping in front of a train, what was his mental state? And he did this while he was believing in Jesus. You have to get this. So this is probably what the Christians were thinking. How can it be that somebody believes in Jesus, who's supposed to save them, and then he ends up jumping in front of a train and he's dead? And the missionary, I remember her very words, and she said, obviously, this is very tragic, and it is very tragic, obviously, she said to the group. But the most important thing is that we know his soul is saved. We know his soul is saved. And this is what you've got to get about Christianity, evangelical Christianity, is this is what they're about, converting souls. And if in the process of doing that, or if it happens a few weeks later, a few weeks, months later, like it did with this Jewish boy, and he ends up committing suicide, all the missionary has to say is, well, at least his soul was saved.